At first glance, the photograph seems harmless, even beautiful. A young couple, John and Margaret Holloway, stand shoulder to shoulder in perfect stillness. Their posture is proud, their smiles subtle, their gaze fixed on eternity. The year was 1902. Sepia tones blur the edges, giving the image that warm, antique calm you'd expect from an old attic find. Soft, peaceful, nostalgic. But peace has a way of deceiving. When restoration experts began digitally enhancing the image more than a century later, something in the air changed. It wasn't just the grain of the film or the aging of the print. It was the feeling, that strange sense that someone, or something, was watching from the other side of the glass. Their smiles weren't right, too tight, too forced. And their eyes, one meeting the lens perfectly, the other drifting, unfocused, as if aware of something standing just off frame. But what truly disturbed the archivist wasn't their faces. It was the faint line, a seam just beneath the woman's jaw, like something had been placed there or attached. Her neck didn't quite align with the rest of her body. His hand, resting gently on her shoulder, looked wrong, stiff, almost positioned. At first it was dismissed as a double exposure, a printing error. But when the technician zoomed in, frame by frame, the truth began to breathe through the pixels. Skin that was far too pale, eyes that reflected no light, shadows that fell in directions light could never create. For 100 years, the Holloway photograph was thought to capture love. But the more you look, the less alive they seem. Because one of them, maybe both, shouldn't be standing there at all. The screen fades to black. Only the faint crackle of an old gramophone lingers, that haunting, imperfect sound of something long dead trying to play again. Then a voice cuts through, calm, low, uneasy. "You're watching Truth Uncaged," it says, "where forgotten pictures speak louder than words, and the dead never stay silent." The photograph flickers back to life. The Holloways, motionless, timeless, wrong. But something feels different now. The husband's gaze sharper, the wife's smile thinner. It's as if the photo knows it's being watched. You're about to witness a story that historians, skeptics, and even forensic analysts have tried to dismiss. The narrator continues, his tone darkening. A photo that refuses to be explained. A smile that was never meant to exist. Static hums softly beneath his words, almost like breathing. "Before we go deeper," he whispers, "look closely at their faces." "What do you see?" A pause stretches. The silence feels alive. "Tell me in the comments below," he murmurs, "because by the time this story ends, you might wish you hadn't looked at all." The faint rhythm of a heartbeat fades in, syncing with the hiss of static. Then one last whisper, barely audible. "Let's go back," he says, "to where this story began, in a quiet town that no longer exists." The screen cuts to black. It was winter, the year 1902. Snow buried the narrow roads of Mayo Millfield. A town so small and silent it almost felt imaginary. The chimneys bled thick plumes of coal smoke into a grey, endless sky, and the wind carried a sound that wasn't quite wind at all, a low hum, faint, almost human. At the edge of town stood a small cottage. That's where John Holloway lived. A blacksmith by trade, a quiet man by instinct. He spoke little, smiled less, and when he did, it never reached his eyes. But behind the walls of his workshop, he had a different passion, a secret one. Photography. In 1902, it wasn't common. It was costly, strange. People said John treated it like a ceremony, like a prayer whispered to something unseen. He believed that every photograph trapped a piece of the subject's soul, that light could steal life itself if used the wrong way. And yet he couldn't stop taking pictures. His wife, Margaret, was everything he wasn't. Warm, graceful, the kind of woman who made people smile without realizing it. Together they were admired, envied even, until winter came and Margaret vanished. Neighbors noticed first. Her laughter was gone. The house stayed dark even in daylight. But at night they saw flickering light behind the curtains and heard strange sounds. The faint clinking of glass and a soft mechanical rhythm, like a heartbeat made of metal. When John reappeared weeks later, his skin was pale, his eyes hollow. In one hand he carried his wooden camera. In the other, a single photograph pressed against his chest. He told the neighbors he had captured something beautiful, something eternal. But no one ever saw Margaret again. For decades, the photograph slept, hidden in a sealed archive box marked simply Holloway Estate. The paper had yellowed, the glass plate cracked, but the faces remained perfect. It was rediscovered in 1973. A young archivist named Daniel Reeves was cataloging forgotten estates. He thought it was just another portrait from a lost century, until he looked closer. At first, it was the eyes. Something in them didn't move right. Too focused, too still, as if they weren't captured, but painted. He adjusted the light, leaned closer. The woman's lips curved upward, but not naturally. The corners were stretched uneven, the smile too deliberate, like it had been forced into place. He turned the photo sideways. Under the magnifier, the truth began to crawl out of the shadows. Faint stitching along the skin, tiny pin marks beneath her jaw, and then something worse. Her pupils were not reflections of light. They were drawn in. Daniel froze. The air felt colder. He placed the photo down, but it felt alive, as if the paper itself was breathing under his hand. He checked the back of the image and found a single line of handwriting, almost invisible under the dust. Together again forever. That's when he dropped it. The glass cracked, and for a split second, he swore her smile widened. After Daniel Reeves vanished, the photograph changed hands. No one knows how or who took it next, only that it resurfaced again, in the possession of a historian named Eleanor Davis. She was known for chasing the impossible. Cold cases, lost graves, the kind of mysteries most people refuse to touch. When she found the Holloway photo, she didn't see art, she saw evidence. The names John and Margaret Holloway appeared in a half-burned town registry. Married in 1898, declared deceased, both of them by early 1903. But here they were, smiling, alive, in a portrait dated after that. Eleanor drove to Millfield. The town was gone, swallowed by forest, only foundations left under the soil. The wind there carried a strange smell like iron and ash. She found the Holloway house by accident, or maybe it found her. Inside, the air was heavy with dust and something else, chemical, sharp, preserved. Glass jars lined the shelves, filled with faded photographs and fragments of fabric. And on the table, under a broken oil lamp, lay a camera. Wooden, handcrafted. Its lens pointed directly toward the doorway, as if waiting. In its compartment, Eleanor found one last plate, negative. A faint image still visible through the decay. The same couple, the same smile, but now there was someone else standing behind them. She took a single step back. The floor creaked, and from somewhere deep inside the hollow walls, a shutter clicked. The archivist's hands trembled as she lifted the photo from its case. What everyone thought was a simple wedding portrait now felt wrong. Under ultraviolet light, something emerged that the naked eye had never caught. Faint outlines beneath the man's collar, bruises, circular, patterned. Not random marks, but fingerprints. The woman's smile, when magnified, wasn't joy. Her lips were slightly parted, and there, just behind her teeth, was the faint trace of thread. Sutures. Her mouth had been sewn shut. For decades, the photo had been used in exhibitions labeled A Moment of Love. 1902, but love had nothing to do with it. The man beside her, Thomas Holloway, wasn't her husband. He was the town's undertaker. The woman, her name wasn't even listed in the records of the living. Her death certificate was dated a week before the photo was taken. The silence in the room thickens. It isn't just a photograph anymore, it's evidence. And the more they look, the more the smiling couple begins to look like something else entirely. A confession hidden in plain sight. But if the photograph was taken after her death, who stood behind the camera? Investigators thought it was a morbid hoax at first, until they discovered that the photographer, a man named Elias Wren, disappeared just days after delivering the portrait to Thomas Holloway. His studio was found abandoned, the chemicals still fresh, the negatives gone, all except one. That last remaining plate showed the same room, the same backdrop. But this time, the woman's head was tilted slightly differently. Her eyes, once closed, seemed open, staring directly at the lens. Experts tried to explain it away as a trick of exposure. But then came the ledger. Inside, in Wren's handwriting, were a few words scrawled under the date, June 21st, 1902. She moved again tonight. No one could prove what he meant. No one wanted to. When police exhumed the woman's coffin in 1911, the lid was found clawed from the inside. Her fingers fractured. Her mouth torn open where the stitches had once been. The smiling couple from 1902 was no longer a mystery of love and tragedy. It had become something darker, something that refused to stay buried. And in that moment, one thing became chillingly clear. This photograph wasn't just capturing death. It was feeding it. For decades, the Holloway portrait vanished from public view. It was quietly sealed away in a private archive, labeled contaminated evidence. The town that once celebrated it as a symbol of devotion refused to even speak its name. But like all buried secrets, it didn't stay hidden. In 1974, a historian named Dr. Marjorie Kent uncovered the image while cataloging forgotten morgue records. Within weeks of its discovery, she reported strange occurrences, doors slamming, whispers during playback of her recorded notes, and once, a woman's faint humming caught on tape when she was alone. 3 months later, Dr. Kent vanished. All they found was her recorder, still running, the tape ending with a low, distorted voice whispering, "Don't look at her face." By the early 2000s, the photo had surfaced online. Forums called it the Holloway Curse, claiming that anyone who stared at it long enough saw the woman's expression change. Some said her eyes followed them. Others swore her lips twitched. Experts called it hysteria. Skeptics called it pareidolia, the human brain forcing patterns where none exist. But even the most rational viewers admitted one thing: the longer you look, the less human those smiles begin to feel. The Holloway photograph remains one of history's quietest horrors, not because of what it shows, but because of what it hides. A moment frozen in time, smiling faces masking something ancient, something patient. We like to believe every mystery can be explained, that science, logic, or reason will save us from the dark. But what if the truth is simpler? What if some things were never meant to be understood, only feared? Even now, the photo circulates across forums, its pixels decaying with every upload, its legend growing stronger. Some say it carries a kind of infection, not of the body but of the mind. The more people see it, the more it is remembered. So tonight, as you turn off this video and the room grows quiet, remember the Holloways. Remember the smiles that never faded, and the photographer who claimed she moved again tonight. Because maybe she still does. Static flickers. A faint hum returns, the same one that played when the episode began. The narrator's voice fades in, softer now, almost hesitant. "Before you go, a quick note from our editing room." He pauses. "When we reviewed the footage of this episode, something appeared during the last sequence. A frame that none of us remember filming. A woman's silhouette, standing just behind the old photograph." Another pause, longer this time. If you scroll back, you might catch it too. The audio glitches. A faint whisper cuts through. "She moved again." The screen darkens to black. Then, one final line fades into view. White text on a void. "Truth uncaged. Some doors should never be opened."